Happy Thursday, everyone. Welcome home. Thank you for choosing to spend some time with me on this day. We have a great show lined up for you. Today, we are focusing on mental health, and we have a renowned expert with us to tackle this issue and to take a long, hard look at how this pandemic is impacting mental health. For months now, we have seen that people are being quarantined in their homes with little or no contact. That is putting some people under stress. We know that healthcare workers on the front lines are battling this invisible enemy that is claiming lives at a ferocious pace. Stress, anxiety, it is all surging. We want to take a look at what this could mean for Africa. We also want to put your questions to our guests, to our experts. So please start sending them in right now, and we'll get answers for you. We're also on today's show going to be taking a look at China and specifically its position in the world of geopolitics right now and how that could impact Africa. Many of you know that in the earliest days of the outbreak of this virus, which took place in Wuhan, in China, that the government there basically shrouded their response in an element of secrecy. And to date, the information that the world needs still hasn't emerged. Many are now asking the question as to whether China intends to use this moment to get ahead. We're going to speak to a former national security advisor in the Clinton administration. Jamie Metzel will be here, and he will break it all down for us. Plus, it is Ramadan, which is an important time for the world's Muslims, a time where they come together, they fast, they pray, and they celebrate community. But what does community look like in the time of a pandemic? We're going to speak to an imam who will explain to us how they're working to still stay together while stay apart. A lot to get through. Let's dig in. Take it amazing. Fear. It seems like it is everywhere right now, and it is with good reason. I mean, when you take a look at the numbers, there are more than 3 million coronavirus cases around the world right now, and we're approaching almost 250,000 deaths. So just think about that for a second. 3 million plus, approaching 250,000 deaths. The images and stories that are emerging day by day are haunting. Stories of refrigerated trucks with bodies piled high, emergency rooms in hospitals so full of sick patients to the point of bursting, if you will. Then these details we get of people dying alone, unable to hold hands with their loved ones or have kind words whispered to them as they pass on. Then we hear about healthcare workers and what they're facing. Many of them without the personal protective equipment they need here in the United States so that they can fight to save other people's lives without infecting themselves and potentially their loved ones. They are dealing with their own personal hell. Fear and anxiety, it is all around. And Africa is now on the minds of many, and we here on this show are saying, what could this all mean in Africa? What could Africa experience? Those stories, those details I shared with you, that's just from the United States, what we see day by day. But what could this look like in Africa? I mean, we already know from some of the modeling that the death toll could be high. According to Imperial College London, they're saying this year alone we could see up to 300,000 deaths. 300,000? I mean, we're talking about untold suffering. We're talking about chaos. We're talking about huge trauma. So we want to bring in an expert now to talk about all of this and really get a sense of what we could be looking at here when we're talking about the psychological impact of this pandemic in Africa. I'm so pleased to say that we have with us Dr. Karsten Koenen. She's a professor of epidemiology at Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and she joins us now from Boston. Dr. Koenen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, Aisha. I'm glad to be here.
Let me start by asking you, when you look at, the continent, obviously we know where we are now, but the potential, I know you've looked at the models. What's your sense of the potential psychological impact on the population from this pandemic?
So I think the COVID-19 pandemic has all the ingredients of having this huge psychological impact because of like all the things you mentioned in your introduction, including the unpredictability, uncontrollability, the information's changing daily. Then we have bereavement, and then we have the economic consequences, which in itself have huge psychological toll. So, I mean, what we're seeing, and then we're seeing data just out of China, which is showing that perhaps as much as 40% of the population, and that's not even talking about healthcare workers, is showing significant anxiety and depression. So we would expect that potentially to be worse in harder hit areas, which now is pretty much everywhere the virus is hitting because China has contained it and other places have not. So I think we're looking at a lot of mental health consequences.
And just so we're clear, when we're talking about these mental health consequences, what are we talking about? Are we talking about, I mean, you tell me, depression? I mean, what's the spectrum here that you're
right? So I think we are talking about a spectrum. So you're talking about anxiety. People feel really stressed. They can't sleep. They're worried about themselves, worried about their loved ones. They also will feel, people starting to feel hopeless. I think you're seeing people starting to feel burned out because, places like South Korea, people have been under lockdown for quite a long time. And they also just feel like there's nothing they can do, or it's very limited what they can do. And then I think for some people, you're seeing post-traumatic stress disorder. We're hearing about that with healthcare workers, also with people who've had COVID, even those who've recovered because of the nature of the illness. Some people are reporting PTSD. So we might even be seeing that as well. And then including in that, we didn't talk about substance use, people drinking more. In the US, I think they talked about alcohol sales going up 20% in the month of March, let alone other substances, people using that to help them cope with this. So that's another cost potentially.
When you look at the situation, obviously, when you look at countries like the United States and countries in Europe versus, countries in Africa, do you foresee, or is it your estimation that the triggers for these disorders would be different? Because, I mean, for instance, when we talk about that issue of isolation and how that is so troubling to so many people here in the US, for instance, I mean, there is less of that sense of isolation in many parts of Africa just because of the population density and the way people typically live. So what is your sense of the triggers there?
Right. I do think they're different. So I think one of the things we're hearing from our colleagues in Africa is that people can't socially isolate, that it's just sort of impossible for many, many people. So that actually can cause anxiety because you're being told you need to and then you can't. So that makes you worried. Then there's issues of a lot of other things like access to clean water, access to hand sanitizer, access is much more limited in certain populations, more so in Africa. So then that creates worry and fear because the things you're supposed to do, you can't do, let alone being able to go out and get food. So I think the challenge to meeting basic needs is even greater, and the sort of disparities there is probably even greater in many places in Africa. And that would be extremely triggering and stress provoking.
So help me understand something, because I think it is a common assumption that when we talk about trauma, which leads to a mental disorder, has an impact on the mind, that it is associated with violence.
Right.
It's something that comes with a car crash or a shooting. And for some people, there's still this kind of disconnect in understanding why a pandemic would have such, in some cases, potentially, in fact, not potentially, we're seeing it have drastic consequences in parts of the world. But why is that?
Because, I mean, a trauma is an event that is unpredictable, uncontrollable, and it exceeds our capacity to cope. And I think that, well, this won't be traumatizing for everyone, but I think for many people are experiencing this. It's certainly unpredictable. None of us could have predicted this. And then from a day-to-day point of view, it changes what we're supposed to do, what the limitations are, what the information is coming out. And then I think the factor of loss of control is really characteristic of trauma. And there just seems to be very little sort of the individual person feels like they can do to control what's going on. And then on top of that is we, as a world, we've never dealt with this before, I mean, in our lifetime. So it does feel out of control. So I think those are some of the things, besides anything else like job loss and other things people may be experiencing.
So as you talk about the variation in responses, let's talk about that. Why do some people have these outcomes when exposed to this kind of situation and others are more resilient? Does that have anything to do with genetics? What does the research show?
Right. Well, that is the $1,000,000 question that I've spent my whole career working on. So I think that some of the things we know is it's based on your past experience. So if you've had prior trauma, which people have had, experienced childhood abuse, experienced violence, that will make you more potentially vulnerable. If you've had mental health problems in the past, I think some of the other things are about the individual. Just I think if you think among your friends, you think about people who who just handle stress better. We all have friends who seem, no matter what life throws at them, they seem to bounce back. And I think some of it has to do with our temperaments, how emotional we are, some people are more optimistic. So those kinds of things. I think the thing that concerns me the most with this is that one of the things we know helps people be resilient is social support. So it's so important to try to remain connected for everyone that's true in a time when it's actually hard to remain connected because we're being told to socially distance. And I've wondered in Africa if that's something that will make people more resilient, is that they will stay connected. Like you said, there's more of a culture of a more communal culture where people are connected, and perhaps that will make people in Africa more resilient to this.
Yeah. Dr. Conan, I want to bring in some of our viewer comments because they are sending the questions in. So I would love to get your take on them. This one, Adejo Victor David says, what is the typical symptoms of someone mentally affected? And what is the danger when they're in that stage? What do you see? What are the red flags? And potentially, how dangerous is this situation? Can you give us your thoughts?
Sure. I mean, I think one of the things I also should say is that it's really normal to feel anxious. Right now. It's normal to feel stressed. It's normal to maybe have some trouble sleeping. So I guess if you're upset and stressed and feeling a bit down, that's normal. And that doesn't mean you have a mental health problem. I think any of those things are a concern if they start really interfering with functioning. So if you have not just a few bad nights sleep, but if you can't sleep night after night, if they're interfering with the things you need to get done. Now, most of us are on a totally different schedule now because we're not leaving our homes. But if you're still not getting up, if you're not taking your dog out, if you're not making those Zoom calls you're supposed to make, or a family member, or your kids, not doing their schoolwork, and you can't seem to get yourself to. So once they start interfering with how you're functioning, that's when you need to get worried. But there is some normalcy in not feeling great right now because we're all going through a major stressor.
Yeah, indeed. Another question that I want to share with you. Actually, comments saying trauma comes from unknowns, resilience comes from the environment as well. Tijan Ibn Mustafa Kalon, psychological well-being is really important, especially in Africa where people have survived diseases, but they go through a lot of stigma. How do people in these situations cope with that? Can we talk to this issue of stigma and how that can, in the African context, and give maybe some comparative analysis, how that can impede, getting help and then really overcoming?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's stigma is another something that's toxic to mental health. And we worry about stigma as in the U.S., there's been stigma against people of Asian descent have experienced stigma. I saw a report recently that a third of people Asian surveyed had experienced some kind of discrimination or even violence related to COVID. And then there's stigma related from people who've been sick. And then there's globally there's stigma when it comes to mental health problems. I think, you could say maybe, is there more in Africa? I don't know, because there's a lot in the US. Yeah. So I think that one of the things that helps is actually covering these issues on your show and people raising awareness about these issues, which I know in Kenya and many of the African governments have made mental health a priority. So in terms of the COVID-19, so I think that will help. I think public education will help a lot. And I think one of the things is that I've seen an explosion of resources through the internet. So I hope one of the silver linings I hope will come out of this is that there'll be reduced stigma when it comes to mental health problems. Yeah,
we certainly hope so. Dr. Conan, such a pleasure. Thank you for the great insight and perspective. We do appreciate it.
Thank you so much, and good luck, and stay safe, Aisha.
Thank you. You too. You too. Again, the thing I want to stress to you from what Dr. Cohn said, it's normal to feel a level of anxiety here. It is normal to feel anxious and, to even have trouble sleeping. These are difficult days. But what we all need to be looking at is when it starts to interrupt with everyday life, when it starts to impede you being, productive, feeling yourself. So, definitely, we did this segment because we want to really shine a light on this issue. And we want it to be an issue that we're talking about, whether in Africa or anywhere else. But we especially in Africa, where there can be the tendency to not address issues of mental health, we want to play our part in shifting that and starting conversations amongst you where you are, and looking at this issue head on. So I hope you found that insightful, and we'll take some of that to heart. So moving on, the novel coronavirus first appeared on the world's radar last December. It appeared in Wuhan, China, and in the earliest days of the outbreak, essentially China shut down the flow of information, and it became very hard to get a full sense of what was happening. That response has drawn criticism since from many countries around the world, including here in the United States. In fact, a recent EU report is accusing China of spreading disinformation about the crisis. And now there are growing calls for an independent international investigation into the outbreak, the origins of the virus, and essentially looking into how China responded to the crisis, all of which China is firmly rejecting. The question now on the minds of many is, what is China's end game? Are they looking at this moment and looking to get ahead? Are they looking at this moment where geopolitics is in flux and looking to surge forward? And where does that leave Africa, which is the focus of our attention on this show? We spoke to a former national security advisor in the Clinton administration, Jamie Metzl. He joined us a little bit earlier and talked to us about his thoughts on this crisis. To give you some perspective, Jamie has written a great deal on China. He's a technology futurist and an author of a book that I want to flag to you, Hacking Darwin, Genetic Engineering and the Future of Humanity. He joined us from New York. And Jamie joins me now from New York. Jamie, welcome.
Thanks, Aisha.
When you look over China's response to the start of this outbreak there in Wuhan last December, what stands out for you?
Well, it's the secrecy of everything. There was an outbreak, obviously. It started somewhere. It was really troubling for me that for the first few weeks, China was engaged in a massive cover-up. And the question is why? Why would they go to such lengths to cover up something? And so for me, I know that, and we all don't have all of the information we need, and it certainly raises a red flag that China has destroyed evidence. They kept World Health Organization inspectors from entering the country, and even now we don't have the level of access that we need. And so on day one, I was really curious because I know that there have been past outbreaks, zoonotic outbreaks that jump from animals to humans, but those tend to happen in the southern provinces of Guangdong and Yunnan. And they don't often happen in Hubei. And I knew that, and I knew that this was, it's a cooler temperature. The bats were hibernating. And I knew that that Wuhan has the only level 4 virology lab in all of China that was studying, for some very good reasons, these kinds of coronaviruses. So it does, for me, I try to live my life according to logic. And that raised a lot of flags.
And now we're in the situation where, due to the lack of transparency, which again China rejects and says, they did everything, they shared information as they got it. But due to that lack of transparency, which a lot of countries and governments that have spoken to, they have been left, these governments, grappling with their responses to this outbreak within their own borders. And some are asking, are we now in a situation, are we now in a moment where geopolitics is shifting? Are we in a moment where China, that withheld some information, is now looking to get ahead? How do you see this moment in geopolitics?
Yeah, so that's a really important question because people think of this as a health crisis, but what I see it's a governance crisis because of first China's failure and then this massive catastrophic leadership failure here in the United States. And so that governance failure became a health crisis, and the health crisis is now an economic crisis, which is morphing into a geopolitical crisis. And we don't know exactly how this is going to play out, but China is recognizing this as a moment of opportunity, as perhaps is Russia. And the United States is on its knees because of just the terrible leadership that we have here. And China, even whatever the questions are about the origins of this outbreak and the initial cover-up, China has actually done a pretty good and aggressive job of responding. And so China is able to get its economy rolling again when the United States is still crippled. China is being very aggressive in the South China Sea, in the Taiwan Strait, and elsewhere. So China is recognizing that this is a once in a generation moment where the balances of power can shift, maybe like happened to the UK in 1956 in the Suez Crisis. And so we're going to see, I think, a lot more of this kind of challenging and jockeying. And if the United States doesn't recognize not just that this is what's happening, but the U.S. has to use its power. And by that power, it's the soft power. That's the greatest tool that the United States has: principles, values, global leadership, allies. We need to recognize the full gamut science of U.S. power. If we start to think that the only tool that we have in our kit is our military, and China is certainly using its military to behave very aggressively, I fear that by the end of the year, some very ugly things could be happening.
Wow. What does this moment mean for China-Africa relations? I mean, you talked about what it could mean in terms of the balance of power between China and the US, but, also referring back to the soft power that China has been flexing, sending, aid supply around the world, being like this benevolent, ally in this moment. Do you see recalibration in this moment with America on its knees and China already in ascendance in Africa? What happens next?
Yeah, that's a great question. And certainly everyone in the world, around the world, including here in the United States, we should welcome help from China. We all need to help each other. China it does a lot of great things. They do a lot of very questionable things. And if China is producing a lot of goods and services and materials that the world needs, so now is the last time we should be trying to cut off relations with China, cut supplies from China. And so that assistance is welcome. But it can't be politicized, both by China, and China can't manipulate its position to try to influence politics in one way or another. And the United States can't play politics. So what Donald Trump is doing now with regard to the WHO, it's just despicable. It's hurting people, and it's got to stop. But as I was telling you before, Aisha, I and others, we're launching a movement on interdependence. And I think in the context of Africa, we need to recognize that helping people in the poorest countries of Africa help themselves, helping to strengthen the public health infrastructures in the most vulnerable countries in Africa, that's not charity. In our interdependent world, that's the way that we protect ourselves, because even if we get a reprieve here in the United States, even if the virus is less virulent here over the summer, if it goes down to the southern hemisphere and they don't have the kind of infrastructure to fight back, the virus is going to mutate, it's going to grow, and it's going to come back here in the fall, and it's going to be our parents, our grandparents, our friends who are going to die. So in an interdependent world, helping the countries in Africa and working with African countries to help them help themselves is not charity. We're recognizing that we are all one human chain, frankly, one ecosystem where we and the other creatures on this planet and our oceans and forests and everything, we're all connected. And this whole us-them paradigm where I'm going to take care of me and you're on your own, it's not just morally wrong, it's actually harmful.
Jamie Metzl, it's always great to get your insights and perspective. Jamie Metzl joining me there from New York. Thank you. Thank you for the work you're doing.
My great pleasure, Aisha, anytime.
Well, you heard Jamie say there that it's not a case of charity in assisting vulnerable countries, vulnerable populations. It's good for everyone. We are mutually connected, and that the aid that China is sending to Africa, the assistance that it has been given, and it is deeply appreciated. It has come in the forms of masks and PPE. It is making a difference. But as Jamie made that important point there, it cannot be politicized and it cannot be used for gain. So we shall see what happens next. But these are definitely uncertain times. So during this pandemic, many of us are staying connected using the internet. The very fact that you're watching the show is because you're online. You're watching Home with Isha Sesay, courtesy of the internet. And that is a luxury that many people in many parts of the world, but significant numbers on the continent, many people don't have that. They don't have that luxury. To give you some perspective on that and this digital divide, listen to this. The World Bank reports that just a third of the population on the continent has access to broadband connectivity, while the Alliance for Affordable Internet reports that consumers in Africa pay some of the highest prices for access to internet. That's some of the highest prices in the world. So now when you talk about high prices, some of the highest in the world, and you put that next to significant numbers of the population in Africa making very small amounts of money, basically earning meager salaries, well, you see what happens to the digital divide. It only gets wider. So let's bring in friend of the show, Arun Zainvali, former CNN alum, and today she has a new title to add to this.
Say it. I want to use. Say it.
Well, I was just reading what I was given. She's also the senior fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. She joined LA to talk about what can be done to, scale up internet access during this time. So, my esteemed colleague from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, how goes it?
It goes well. I thought I needed a longer title by way of introductions today and something to anchor me in a bit more gravitas because I keep turning up in caps and T-shirts these days. So I figured I needed a little more for you to say that.
Oh, yeah. So a cap that says Kenya. That's really going to do it if you add that title. Speaking of which, I spent half the time on the show saying you're the brightest person I know. So let's show people that I wasn't wrong.
All right, you were not wrong, I hope. So essentially, there's this conundrum that we need to focus on the continent on prevention. How do we communicate to people across the continent, those that are connected, those that are not connected, on what they need to do? How do we get data and information about what people might be needing and what's happening on the ground? So this week, and I would say the last month, there's been a very intense conversation on how do we reach 603 million people on the continent that have mobile phones and that have no access to 3G or 4G, right? So that's 23% of people on the continent have that connectedness. So what's been discussed is that mobile phone companies, all the big beasts on the continent, all the telcos need to come together. And the telcos need to build one platform called the USSD platform. And you'll know by being on the continent so much, when you get the mobile phone, you can press 1 to top up. You have a scratch card. You press pound. It's that sort of dumb technology. It's not smartphone technology. So they have developed a universal kind of a Q&A, right? That focuses on what to do for COVID prevention, to ask questions about food in general. when did you last eat? What is the price of the X tomato or maize? Can you even get that? And number 3, symptom trackers. So do you have cough? Do you have fever? Anyone in your household, etc. And so this data will then be able to be accessed by all the telcos, who can then look at it, share it, and analyze it, and organize the data in such a way that all countries will be able to see where are their clusters of a health potential crisis, who needs food. And the fact that you have the mobile phone numbers means that you can also identify the missing people who we had no record of, who were part of the informal sector of the continent, and then all of a sudden COVID hit, and the roses guy selling roses disappeared, and the seller on the street, they disappeared. So there is no database or record of how to get to them. How are they doing? What do they need? And so they hope that in this manner, if this happens, that we would be able to identify people, identify a health status, and track them to an extent that if we have a food crisis, security crisis, you could send $25 or something, or money or something to help out and know who they are and where they are.
And Zain, how close are we to making this a reality? The platform has been built, but where are we with the rollout?
So I from what I understand, not far. So perhaps within the next month, perhaps sooner. Right. And so always the problem, as you know, has been mobile phone companies get data, so much data from the continent. But one of the challenges has been the time to organize that data and to analyze that data and to understand what it means in the voluminous nature that all the telcos have from the continent. So they are integrating it with a AI, an analytical tool that AI will be trained to analyze the data from the continent and then combine it with their social media insights. So you and me on digital, I'm coughing, I have COVID, I don't feel well. It's reading all of that on the digital front. And once the USSD data comes through, it can then be analyzed by the same, with a technology that has the capabilities of organizing that data. So hopefully soon, but that's the dream.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. As we talk about technology and the opportunity it provides, can we talk about the state of learning on the continent? Because obviously education has been disrupted there as well as it has, here in the United States and everywhere else in attempts to halt the spread of coronavirus. Where are we seeing the innovation in terms of helping children on the continent continue learning? What are you seeing as you look around?
So the conversations around that have been mostly starting from the digital space, but with an acknowledgement that just because children aren't online that they can't learn. So that when you look at the numbers, there are, because of COVID, 118 million children out of school. Over that 118 million, 10 million are on the internet, right? And
wow.
so that's there's an audience. And so there's a heavy conversation on what exists on the continent already. Who can we fund? Who are the people doing learning on various digital platforms? What's been working? What's not working? What kind of learning do we need to put together? How do we involve creatives, Aisha, in our ecosystem? To curriculums and have masterclasses and do it in local language, and what media do you partner with that can have reach? And obviously radio and audio is the most powerful tool on the continent outside of mobile. And so there's conversations about how to leverage that and build educational tools to do that. So there are a number of foundations and organizations globally and on the continent, like right now, looking at how do we build learning? What does the future of learning look like, given that by most analysis on the ground, if Africa gets hit hard, it's still to come, right? And so it's within this context that we'll be indoors potentially for a while. I hope we're wrong, but potentially.
Yeah, and Zain, because I know you know these issues as well. I mean, we do have to acknowledge how significant this moment is in terms of being harmful for the development of human capital on the continent, seeing learning disrupted in this way.
Yeah. No, very much so. I mean, you have such a dire knock-on effect across the continent at a moment where we were seeing the fastest GDP growth in the world was on our continent, and learning and education was a very big driver. And we don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose the future. This is what we're investing in, the future of the continent. So it really is a crucial a crucial moment, and we don't want to lose the future generations because of coronavirus and economies collapsed around us, and children just simply couldn't learn basics and more sophisticated learning. So yeah, it's definitely top of agenda, top of mind, Aisha.
Well, Zain Verjee, I mean, you may have a new title, but you're still the same to us, which is fab. Thank you for always bringing these important stories to us and just giving us some more depth. So thank you. Thank you so much. Zain Verjee, Senior Fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, joining us there from LA. Thank you, friend.
You're the first to say it ever.
Send my check. These are hard times. Send money.
I will send you on when the mobile platform gets launched. I will send you 100 shillings from my youth. Thank you, Aisha.
Bye, Zain. All right. So you heard Zain there really just giving us some perspective on tech and innovators looking to bridge digital divides in this moment, looking to help children get back online so they can start, or get online in some cases, so that they can continue with their learning. The education isn't disrupted too greatly. And also talking about this platform that's being built where the telecoms on the continent are going to unite to build one platform that people can converge around and will push out important information about this pandemic. So it is all critically needed, and I'm great that Zain could join us to share that. Okay, you've been writing in, and I just want to say thank you so much to you. Every day that we were on air, to see all of you from around the world send in your messages and watch the show means so much. So thank you for being part of the Home with Isha Sesay community. The messages today are coming from all over the place. We've got people writing to us. See this, and then I always get confused when I look down and I can't find the messages. But we have people watching from the United States. We have people who are saying that they are watching from the Middle East. I just want to give a shout out to some of the people who have written in. Paul Idris wrote in and is watching with us. Thank you. Abdul Majid, thank you for being with us. So many people, Isaac Kyle, commenting on the conversation we had with China. Kari Mansaray, she is a stalwart and a regular and is always with us. Thank you. Full disclosure, she's my cousin also. I feel I have to tell you that. So she's writing in, also getting messages here from Jessica. Yes, we are online. That's true. It's a privilege, and we have to acknowledge that privilege and see how we can widen the opportunity for others. Thank you, Jessica, for that message. It is much appreciated. Michael Mickey T says, greetings to you, Isha Sesay, missing you at CNN. You shouldn't miss me at CNN when you can watch me every day here for an hour. So I'm not really sure why people still say that, because you get more than enough of me now on Facebook Live. Some would say you get too much of me. But anyway, I'm here every day with the show, Monday through Friday. So tune in and you won't have to miss me anymore. All right. So this is a moment where we all have to do our part. In this moment, in this pandemic, we have to do our part to help others. Now, that could be as simple as sending a text to a loved one or a friend. It could be supporting a small business in your community, or simply just by following the guidelines, the recommendations by the World Health Organization to stay indoors and to maintain distances and wash your hands frequently so that we can contain the spread of the novel coronavirus. You can do your part. And I want to tell you about someone who has taken that to a whole new level. You may remember this man. We had Congolese comedian Eddie Kadi on the show a few weeks ago. There's a lot going on, so your mind may also be a little fuzzy. Let's remind you of the conversation. Take a look.
How are you holding up You know what? I'm glad you've asked me what's going on where you are and how are you holding up, because I'm sick and tired of those questions. That's what's your plans for today? I have no plans. I'm at home. You understand? Like this is the issue. Like people are asking questions that they would normally ask on an everyday basis, and they're just being ignorant. You're not helping me by asking me, what's on your bucket list for Sunday? Is it Sunday? When is it? Is it Sunday? Because I believe all the days are now united. I can make Tuesday Monday if I want. So I'm glad you've asked me. I'm at home. I've been at home for over a week now. I'm used to traveling a lot, so this is a little bit difficult. But I believe it's an opportunity for me to do things I wouldn't normally do. Like visit my kitchen.
Well, Eddie Keddy's been doing a lot more than just visiting his kitchen since that appearance. He's actually the brains behind a new campaign, an alliance of celebrities, of people from the continent who are well known. He is bringing everyone together, asking everyone to use their voice to support the continent in this moment, using the hashtag #InForAfrica. He asked me to be a part of it. I said yes. We kicked things off a few hours ago virtually. The man himself, the myth, the legend, Eddie Keddy joins us now once more to kind of just share the origins of this mission. Eddie, you put a jacket on.
Yeah.
I appreciate you making an effort, as always.
I'm glad you recognized that, because the last time it was a little bit laid back, and I thought today's a bit of a serious conversation. And of course, at home, Isha Sesay is going to different stratospheres. So I thought, let me pay homage. And I haven't worn anything outstanding in a long time, so I thought I'd use this as an opportunity.
Thank you. We always appreciate the effort. So tell us, again, I just said to the viewers that we launched the campaign formally a couple of hours ago, but can you just tell us a little bit more about it, the mission and really why you felt this was the moment for you to kind of pull everybody together?
As you mentioned earlier, we've all had a lot of time. I've had a lot of time at home, more so than I would usually have. And people were sharing information. Family members were sharing information, and you're hearing from people who are close to you talking about, whatever you're going through with COVID-19 and the lockdown in London, for us it's a little bit more difficult than that. And then you hear your Ghanaian friends saying the same thing. There's some friends in South Africa saying those same things, and you think, oh man, I'm actually, a lot of things I was complaining about or I was stressed about, I actually thought I'm in a position much better than most people. Then it got me thinking, why am I in this position and they're not? There must be a purpose to it. I really believe nothing happens by chance. And I thought maybe because I'm a bit more empowered, so I can help them, And I remember seeing a video from a lady in Nigeria who was talking about being in a home where she's got electricity, she has access to food, and she has a secure home. But so many people out there, a lot more than her and her family, were in dire situations. And she really cried for them. And that really resonated with me, and that really touched me. So I reached out to a friend of mine, Dorothea Hodge, who works for a company called Equitas, and they specialize in communication and PR, and I've worked with governments and so many massive initiatives around the world. So I wrote this concept where I was like, the best thing I can do is just rally around my friends, get all my friends who are influencers, who are in the world of sports and, community leaders to come together and show this show of love and solidarity and create something that maybe we've done before, but not as a unit, That's why we came together and combined with so many other people with this #InForAfrica initiative. And I know, what has happened in the last 10 to 14 days usually takes months to even get to, and it was just about connecting with like-minded people who felt the same and in reaching out to you who was in the same position, the same mindset as myself. That's why we had an answer for you. Just within 30 seconds, you had responded, and here we are.
So here we are. People want to know, or if they didn't see the press conference earlier, they want to know how they can help. What is the ask? What are we calling on people to do? And, I do want I want to drum, build up anticipation. There is a big event that kind of ties this all together, May 25th. Talk to us about that.
So the idea here is to cause awareness. It's kind of in two strands. First of all, we're dealing with the idea of the misinformation going around the continent. Many people are panicking because they're just unaware of what to do based on the information they receive daily on their phones, and they're not sure what's real, what's not real. So it's about gathering out together, getting the right information from places like the World Health Organization and many other organizations around the continent and the world, right? And in order to actually encourage people to pass on this information. So we're setting a challenge, and that's hashtag #InfoAfrica for people. Once you find this information out that's real, put it out there in a hashtag, but also just show solidarity, messages of love, and videos that we've had going around from so many influencers. Aisha, you did a beautiful one as well. I think funny to your dialect. You know, as a proud Salon girl, we were very proud of that. So many artists and celebrities and influencers have been showing videos of love, and that's something that we want to continue. We want a snowball effect. But on Africa Day, the 25th of May, we're actually trying to do, or we are going to do, a festival, Info Africa Festival. And this will entail different celebrities, different artists coming over and doing lives with us. You know, I know actually you're going to join us on that day too. And of course, we're going to be exchanging just messages of love, information. We had the great Awilo Longumba who joined us in the press conference earlier, and he gave us a taster.
He did give us a taster. He busted a move. Like suddenly the man was up on his feet, and I'm like, "What's going on?"
Congolese people, you know, but this is what we're going to have DJs on that day partying with us. We're going to have, maybe footballers who can share us some information on what's going on in their world. But ultimately that day, we want to raise funds. We want to raise funds for the less vulnerable. We want to raise funds for those in remote communities. And this is particular for the United Nations Foundation COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund. That's going to also facilitate for the WHO to actually be able to deliver to grassroots communities. So we're not just talking about a fund that will go sit somewhere and just be dashed randomly, but we want to also help those who are already on ground, brothers like myself and yourself who are already on ground and actually doing the work for their communities. So the 25th of May on this was chosen Africa Day for that reason, a day to celebrate Africa. We're going to have DJs, we're going to have artists, we're going to have footballers, we're going to have community leaders, and we're going to be exchanging a lot of fun, a lot of conversation, but also importantly as well, just information that's vital in order for us to fight this together.
Yeah, Eddie, I'm so grateful for you doing this and for you asking me to be part of it, because I think it's important, not obviously for this moment, which is most critically saving lives, but also for a longer term reason in terms of shifting the narrative around the continent and around this idea. And people who watch the show know I say it a lot. There is this idea out there that Africans aren't looking to solve their own problems, or Africans prefer to have other people come and solve their problems, other Westerners. You are, by creating this initiative, really pushing back that and convening everyone. And the thing we said earlier on today that I want to reiterate, everyone's an influencer. Everyone has a circle. Everyone has a platform. So even though you've asked people who have recognizable faces to kind of spearhead this so that, we can push out the word, it's not about people who are instantly recognizable. It's about all of us. It's about all of Africa standing together for Africa.
Sure. I think that's a great point. In stressing that everyone's an influencer, because we have to understand not everybody's got access to mobile phone or even television or maybe even radio. But you who are in a position that you have this information, you can see, you can access social media, you can then access those people in remote places. You automatically become an influencer. And one thing that's important as a diasporan, we've never really understood our purpose and our influence and our power. I always say that our parents left Africa so we can have a better opportunity to go back and build an Africa for them to go back to, and that's really important right now, where we show our power as diasporans to show that we do care, we do have the skill sets, we have acquired things to do, with Africans for Africans. That's extremely important, and I'm saying to everybody that's out there right now watching, if you're not sure how to get in contact, you may not have direct contact. We are Info Africa across all social media. That's Twitter, that's Facebook, that's Instagram. But we also do have an email, which is imin@infoafrica.org. You can also go to the website, which is infoafrica.org, and all the information will be there. But I have to stress that we have to join solidarity. Even if, you haven't got the funds to help with the donation, you can create a video. You can just pass on the right information and not just pass on every single video. I've had to tell a few of my family members, that's not true. That's not right. Look in the background. That's Photoshop. So it's about making sure you can save a life just by saying that's not real information. Let me give you the right one.
Yeah, well, I stand by you. I'm standing with you. We're building out this team. You know, it's a continent of 1.3, 1.2, almost 1.3 billion people. There are a lot of us. And so we expect this to be a massive effort spanning the entire length and breadth of the continent. Not culminating, but certainly a high point will be May 25th. It will go on long beyond then. But, you know, certainly working towards a big moment of hope and community on May 25th. Eddie Caddy, my friend, thank you. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for your work.
Thank you for your hard work. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great day.
Speak to you soon. I'm sure you'll be nagging about something. I'll speak to you soon.
Because you have to expose me internationally. Take care.
Take care. Take care, my friend. You know, all I'm going to say is a moment for all of us. Let's all come together. Let's all stand for the continent. Let's do our part. For the world's 1.8 billion Muslims, Ramadan is a treasured period. This is a holy month which began a week ago today, and it is a time when one of the goals is to deepen one's relationship with God through prayer, through fasting, through scripture, and just as important as that solo connection, that individual connection with God, it's also about strengthening multiple connections within the community. So it's about you and the many. And with Ramadan, you know the images, breaking fast, being surrounded by loved ones, acts of charity within the community. That is what love is all about. But how do you do any of that right now when governments around the world, in an attempt to halt the spread of coronavirus, have basically passed laws or given certainly mandates that restrict movement, that close mosques, that ban large gatherings? Where does that leave Ramadan? We have with us, joining us from Freetown, an imam to share with us his perspective on how you maintain community and how Ramadan is different this time in the age of COVID. Joining us now is Sheikh Ali Khaleh. He joins us from Freetown, where he's the chief imam at the Ibadu Rahman Mosque. Sheikh Khaleh, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Aisha. Assalamu alaikum.
Malaikum salam. It's good to have you with us. Let's start by getting from you your sense of the spirit of Ramadan this year. How is it different? Describe it for us.
Thank you very much. Ramadan Mubarak to you all. Ramadan, as you mentioned, it is the time that the bulk of the Muslims meet in the mosques around the world, not only in Sierra Leone. It is the time we make sadaqah, charity. It is the time we share food. It is the time we are expecting people to pay zakatul fitr at the end of the month. It is the time we are in to perform Eid al-Fitr, which we do in a large, crowd in a field, like, for example, our own area here, the Tengwe Town, Brookfield area. We pray at the National Stadium, where everybody is going to assemble. In most cases, we even receive guests like presidents, first ladies, as the case may be. But this time around, the case is different. As I speak, at home, we break fast at home. We do our Qiyamul Layl or Tarawih prayer at home. We only communicate with each other through our smartphones or by email or by other means, so that is the sad thing about this Ramadan. It is an isolated Ramadan, COVID-19 Ramadan, so be Ramadan behind closed doors.
It is
so we miss our congregations, we miss our jama'ats.
And Sheikh, let me ask you, with it being Ramadan in isolation, you've talked about using technology to try and bridge that divide. But I want you just to speak, to people who maybe are struggling with this isolation. People who are struggling to remain indoors. People want to gather in mosques, but they can't. What words of comfort can you give people who are struggling right now under these restrictions and unable to have the Ramadan they would have wished?
Yes. Well, the thing is, worship or ibadah, not like an idolatry. God Almighty rewards people based on their intentions. So this time around we can't go to the mosque, but it is not by by our wish. We are forced to do so by a situation. So we don't go to the mosque, but we receive the full package from Allah, because we want to go there, but there is a lion out there, right? So we pray at home. God Almighty is going to reward us, and this is not the only situation. Even during bad weathers, if the news comes out that there's going to be bad weather, it is going to be too hot, it is going to be too cold. These things are teachings. There's nothing new about this whole thing, because it happened during the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. There was a plague we call in Arabic ta'un, and the Prophet warned the people not to go there at all. And those that were there, he warned them not to go out of that place. So there was a time the Prophet himself warned the people not to go out to pray, because it was too hot at that time. Yes. There was a time a man was sick.
So we have seen this before.
It was a tumor.
And so people should take that knowledge that we've seen it before and hold on to the knowledge that their intention is what guides, is what is most important.
Yeah, it's what matters. Yeah.
The prayers will be heard. Sheikh Ali Khaleh, I'm sorry that we have to leave it there, but I am so grateful for your words of encouragement to the Muslims of Sierra Leone and around the world in this time. I hope that they can find some joy and be at peace. Sheikh Ali Khaleh, thank you. Be safe.
Thank you, Aisha. Yeah, thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you are also doing well in America, because we do worry for you too. Your death rate is too high, than anybody else. So we pray for you. We pray for you.
Yeah. Thank you. Be safe.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
The words of encouragement there. Words of encouragement for everyone. Now, through all of this chaos, we try to look to the bright side. We try to look to see how we can maintain our sense of positivity, our sense of joy. That's important for our humanity. And it's important as a coping mechanism to get through this. So we always end the show on the bright side. And today, our bright side is an author and activist. His name is Ishmael Beer, acclaimed author of the book A Long Way Gone. Just published another book called Little Family. He's going to be joining me in just a few moments on Instagram. Take a look at how he's doing right now.
Hello everybody, welcome to The Bright Side. My name is Ishmael Beer. I am author of A Long Way Gone, Radiance of Tomorrow, and recently released Little Family. Since we've all started staying in, we've have to be parents at the same time being school teachers of various subjects, etc., etc. And also at the publishing book while all of this is happening. So let me give you a little preview into what I've been up to. Let's go. Are you coming?
Après, tu viens au Mopti pour le concert. Si tu viens au Mopti, il n'y a pas oublié moi. D'accord, moi je m'appelle Mamadou. Moi je tombe ton musique bien, 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 bien. D'accord, ciao, bonne journée, ciao, bisous.
That's it. I'm sure excited to be hanging out with Isha Sesay at 1 p.m. Pacific time. We talk all things literature, politics, current situation, and we're both from Sierra Leone. So join us.
There is so much to talk about with Ishmael Beer. First of all, how he cooked that meal. And we're heading over to Instagram right now. So please join me over there. The handle, I am Isha Sesay. That does it for us here with Home with Isha Sesay, whether you're watching us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. That's it for today. We'll be back same time, same place with the show on Monday. So join us then. Please be safe, everyone. And thank you for spending time with me today. Bye for now. But come to Instagram. See you soon.